So we actually surveyed about just shy of 200, I think it was 190 some odd people. And these were the results when we asked them, what they basically thought about Office 365 licensing. And you can kind of see the big portion over here on the right is that costs are hard to find savings. It's hard to uh, manage cost. And, obviously Microsoft had recent price increases, and we think that's a trend that'll continue over time. And so, in other words, about 38% of people struggle with cost. And then if you look at a couple of the other categories in here, 17% have a hard time understanding bundles and plans and bundles and plans. Another 11% have a hard time understanding licensing. And so, the difference there really is the bundles and the plans. Well, what is M365? What's O365? What comes in them. And then licensing is, do I buy it through an EA or a CSP program? And then about 7% say that they have a hard time tracking and managing installed licenses. So you get somewhere in the neighborhood of about 35% of people that struggle with the licensing aspects of Office 365. And then the next piece, the next big piece of these 6% up here that are about data and visibility into what's actually being used. Okay, so if you kind of break it down, basically what happens, about a third of people are really struggling with the cost of O365, trying to find savings. About a third really struggle with licensing and how licensing programs work. About 10 to 12% of people struggle with getting the data to make important decisions. And I would actually state that data feeds cost and feeds licensing information. And then you got about 13% that are, not sure if they have any challenges or not. And so, the big thing we're going to talk about today is kind of this understanding the bundlings and maybe touch a little bit on the data. But what that really kind of boils down to, when I get asked a lot, the number one question that I get asked is, what is the difference between Microsoft 365 and Office 365? That is bar none the number one question that I get asked. And I'm going to seek to answer that here sometime in the next 5 minutes and hopefully clarify that. Okay. So first things are, we're going to go through how those bundles work. So we're going to talk about E3s versus E5s. We're going to touch a little bit on the F plans. And then a couple of things to note is the diagrams that I'm using are provided by a Microsoft employee called Aaron Dinich. They're located at m365maps.com, so you can go and grab those there, or his GitHub is there, or if you want to follow them on LinkedIn or Twitter. These are one of the easiest ways that I know to actually look at the O365 bundles and how they work. So the first thing I want to talk about is answering that question of what is the difference between Office 365 and M365. And when I talk to my team all the time, I tell them there's no such product as Office 365 or M365. Those are not products. Those are a brand, and they are bundles. The products themselves are the services that live inside of those. So that's going to be things like Exchange Online, Teams, SharePoint Online, the Office product, which is now called M365 Enterprise Apps. So it's the services that are products. The rest of it is just a marketing bundle. So when people say to me, well, what is the difference between O365 and M365? The answer really is there isn't really a difference. The O365 is contained within a bundle called M365. So M365 is just the biggest bundle you can buy from Microsoft, where O365 is a portion of that. And sort of where this comes from, how this kind of all started is if we slide back a number of years back to when there were this thing called perpetual licenses and on-prem software versus the cloud, Microsoft used to sort of create their products into three buckets. They had an applications bucket, that was your Office licenses. So anything installed on a desktop, Office licenses, Project Visio, MSDN, Visual Studio, those sorts of things were application products. They had server products. So those were things on servers, Windows servers, SCCM or System Center, Exchange servers, SharePoint servers. And then they had the desktop OS, Windows, it's Windows 11 or Windows 10 nowadays. But they had these three products, and they were kind of distinct, and they kind of sold licensing separately from those. Now, when they moved to this O365 world, they started kind of in that server world. So they created a service where you moved your server products into their cloud. Exchange, SharePoint, and back then it was Skype when they first started out, which is now Teams. And so they created this product called Office, or this marketing bundle called Office 365, and they pushed those server products in there. And then, you fast forward a little bit after the launch of O365, they had so much success driving that they decided to move their other perpetual licenses, the stuff that remained on premise, into subscription-based licensing. And they wanted to get into subscription-based licensing because if you in subscriptions, you kind of always got to be paying. You can't stop paying and just ride a perpetual entitlement to a license. So they created a bundle called Microsoft 365, and they added into that their Windows CALs, their SCCM CALs. So those were the client access licenses that allowed you to access those servers. And then they added the Windows OS in as a subscription as well. And so that's why when you hear back in the day on premise, if we talk about Windows for a second, you probably are familiar with Windows Pro and Windows Enterprise. And then all of a sudden these Windows E3 show up. Well, Windows E3 is just Windows Enterprise as a subscription service. Okay, as a subscription license, so to speak. So if you look at this chart here, Microsoft 365 E3 is everything on this page. Office 365 E3 is just the stuff in red. So what is the difference between Office 365 and M365? That was like I said, the number one question that I get asked. The difference is Office 365 is included M365. M365 doesn't just include your kind of old traditional server products. It includes your what was on-prem or still could be on-prem access to Windows servers and System Center servers and your Windows OS. So if we take a look at this slide for a few minutes, I'm going to talk about Office 365 E3. Now there is lower ones. There's an Office 365 E1. There's some differences in what you get in Exchange and SharePoint and things like that, which we won't go into depth on this call on. But the biggest difference is you don't get Office in those. So Office 365 includes Office, whereas an E1 does not. And then it has some lighter, lower level access to Exchange, so smaller mailboxes, smaller OneDrives, those sorts of things. But if we look at Office 365 E3 here on the left, the stuff in the red, it is made up of 35 different products or services. So some of the things in the little red boxes contained within, kind of the whole thing here labeled O365. So these 35 boxes, some of those are products and some of those are services. So the difference being a product is something that I can buy and use. A service is something that is included and you can choose to use it or not. So a good example there is alert policies. Alert policy is a service. It's not a product that you go out and buy. You just get alert policies as part of purchasing an O365 E3. Okay. So the product itself is made up of these services. It's made up of these 35 different services or products. So when we talk about a product, what would be a product and not a service? Exchange Online would be a product. SharePoint would be a product. Exchange Online Protection would be a product. Okay, Microsoft Teams would be a product. OneDrive would be a product. The Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise would be a product. Now, in this bundle, some of these products I can purchase separately as standalone products. So for instance, if I didn't need all 35 of these services, and I just needed a user to have, say, an email account, I could just purchase Exchange Online. Some of these products are only contained within the bundle and cannot be purchased separately. Now, not necessarily this O365 bundle, more when we get into the security products and compliance products in a little bit. But the thing to note is that sometimes some of the services or products can be purchased separately, and sometimes they can only be purchased as part of a bundle, okay? So Office 365 E3 are these products and services on the left. And then in the middle, you get this product or marketing bundle called Enterprise Mobility Security Suite, EMS. And this is the E3 version of it. So EMS, again, is a bundle of products, okay? And those bundles of products are down here in the, brighter blue, I guess we can call it, is a product called Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1. Now, Azure Active Directory, you can see over here for O365 is included as a service inside of Office 365 E3. Again, we're not going to dive into the depths of the differences between Azure AD for O365 free versus Azure AD Premium Plan 1 or Azure AD Premium Plan 2 that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But you can see that there's a progression. The Azure AD for O365, the free version, is going to have limited functionality. You can Google the differences between Azure AD plans. There's a whole chart that'll come up and show you the differences in those plans, and you can sort of move through them and understand the differences there. But just note that the things here within this dotted line and the brighter blue are the services that make up an Azure AD Plan 1. Okay, so that is things like single sign-on. That is things like password protection. There's some conditional access included in there. Now, I cannot purchase any of those services that are inside that Azure AD Plan 1 as a standalone product. So if I just wanted, I don't know, say Microsoft conditional access, I can't just buy conditional access from Microsoft. I have to purchase Azure AD Plan 1. So that is an example where a bundle is all that I can buy. I can't buy an individual product or service. Now, when we're talking about Azure, the EMS suite, the stuff up here in the, I don't know, greenish blue, I don't know if that's the color of it or not, are other products that are included in this bundle. So you'll see here, these are Windows Server Cal rights. So what that is back in the on-premise licensing days, I bought Windows Cals, either user or device-based, and that allowed my users or devices to access Windows servers. EMS gives you the right to do that. So I no longer need to buy a Windows Server Cal. If I have EMS, it gives me the right. You'll see the Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager. That is your System Center manager license. So same concept. I used to buy that on-premise as a device or user cal. If I have EMS, I don't need to purchase that. You'll see an Intune for their MDM or their MAM product. So you can actually purchase that product as well, or that's included. If I want to use Intune and I have EMS, I get that. They also have the Azure Active Directory Rights Management Server in there. So again, that's another product. It controls access to Excel and Office documents and who can print and who can see. It's an access control product in some way. And then you get a couple of other things like an information protection product and some endpoint analytics as well. And so all of the stuff in the blue category makes up this product that Microsoft calls the EMS suite. Okay. Over on the right here in the green is the Windows OS. So this is the old Windows Enterprise product. It's now called Windows E3. I think this slide probably needs to be updated to say Windows 11, but it's your Windows Enterprise. So you still need to purchase licenses when you buy your desktop or your PC or your laptop. You get the Windows Pro edition that comes with it. This allows you to put Windows Enterprise that has additional functionality over and above the Windows Pro license that comes with a PC when you buy it. And so you'll see things like MDOP, that's the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Plan, which has some tools in it to manage desktops, manage BitLocker, and some other things. But again, you can see the services that make up the Windows 10 enterprise product here in these green boxes. Now, again, nothing here you could purchase separately. So if I had a Windows Pro machine and I just wanted to get Windows Hello for logging into PCs using Hello, I couldn't just buy Hello. I would have to buy the Windows 10 E3, or I can still get Windows Enterprise on-premise licenses, but I can't just buy that as a standalone product. So we have 3 products here and a 4th that I'm going to talk about. So we've talked about the first 3, which is Office 365 in the red, EMS in the middle in the blue, and Windows 10 in the green on the right. Everything on this page, as encompassed in that sort of purple box that kind of runs from the right to the left, makes up Microsoft 365 E3. So to go back to the question, the number one question that we get asked, what is the difference between Microsoft 365 E3 and Office 365 E3? Microsoft E3, 365 E3 is a bigger bundle of products that contains, as a subset, Office 365 E3. So, or I can say that as Office 365 is a subset of the products contained in the bundle that is Microsoft 365 E3. So there really isn't a difference other than with Microsoft 365, I get the EMS suite and the Windows OS. O365, I only get the O365 products. So hopefully that clarifies that question, because we get asked that a lot, like I said. So I'm going to go to the next slide here and talk about the Microsoft 365 E5. Now this is the big Uber bundle that Microsoft has. It's the biggest one that you can get in the family. And this is where they're trying to sell everybody. And I'm going to start a little bit different on this one. I'm going to work from the right and then go to the left on this one. So with Windows, there's a Windows 10 E5 license. Okay, now it says step up here. And the reason it says step up is if I have Windows E3 or Microsoft 365 E3, and I just want it to move to Windows E5, I could do a step up of Windows E5. If I have a Windows E3 or a Microsoft 365 E3 license, I can step up to Windows E5. Now, if I do that, what do I get? By stepping up to Windows E5, I get Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So that's Microsoft's antivirus product for the endpoint, and that's the difference between an E3 and an E5. There's no other functionality difference. It is just their endpoint defender, their endpoint security product. And again, you'll notice that endpoint for defender over here in the bottom right-hand corner is in a dotted box. So those are the services that are included in endpoint or defender for endpoint. Again, I can't purchase just threat analytics or tamper protection or block at first sight as a product or service. It's included in the endpoint product itself. It is a service that's contained there within. Okay. So next, if I move to the middle, we're on to the enterprise mobility security E5 step up. So again, if I have an EMS E3 license, an M365 E3 license, I can step up to E5 for EMS. And if I do that, I get these products that are included here in the middle. Okay. The big one is the one down here that is in the blue, or the brighter blue in the dotted blue box, which is Azure AD Premium Plan 2. And so that's where if I'm doing things like privileged identity or risk-based conditional access, that I need to Azure AD Plan 2 in order to use those functions, that's where I can buy that product. Now, I can buy Azure AD Plan 2 as a standalone product, or I can buy it contained within the EMS E5 bundle. If I buy the EMS E5 bundle, I also get Microsoft Defender for identity. I get rule-based AIP or rule-based AIP for rule-based classification. So that basically allows us to create rules on files and users that say do certain things with them. And then I also get the Microsoft Cloud App Security product. Okay, so again, I can just purchase Azure AD Plan 2. I can just purchase Microsoft Cloud App Security, and I can just purchase Microsoft Defender for Identity as standalone products. So whether I wanted to purchase the EMS E5 would basically be based on the price of the EMS E5 and what I need to use in there. So if I just wanted Microsoft Defender for Identity, and I don't know the prices on these, so don't quote these, don't write these down. Let's say that's $3 and the EMS step up is $7 a month, and I just want Defender for Identity, I would probably just buy the $3 Defender for Identity, not the $7 step up to E5. Okay, so when determining what I need to purchase, I'm going to look at what I can buy, how I can buy that, and then determine from there. Okay, so now we're going to move over to the left and go into Office 365 E5 step up. So again, if I have a Microsoft 365 E3, I can step up to E5. If I have an M365 E3, I can step up to E5. Or I could just buy an Office 365 E5. So when you use a step up, the difference between a step up and just buying an E5 license is if I already have a license in place that is a lower version, then I would step up versus buying the full E5 product. If I don't, I would just buy the full E5 product. So typically where these are used is I'm in an enterprise agreement. I signed up for the E3 product initially. 18 months later, I decide I need the E5 product. I step up to the E5 product and I move from there. Now, you do not need to step up to the full E5. we have a lot of clients that are looking at certain portions of this product here, and they think that they need to step up to a full M365 E5, and they really don't. Okay, so before we go there, let's talk about the stuff in the orange, which is the E5 step up. And so really what happens here, again, there's a change that needs to be made to these slides. This is from June 21. Aaron hasn't updated these, but the audio conferencing product that is here is now included in E3. Okay, so audio conferencing are the bridges for Teams. Microsoft basically said those were free and moved them out of the E5 and put them in the E3 and in some of their other packages. I think the reason that they did that is, post-COVID, it used to be prior to COVID, people would want a telephone number to dial into an audio conference. Now, 90% of people are just using, we got data to support this, 90% of people are just using the Teams client itself. So they're not actually using, a landline or their cell phone to call into these things. 90% of calls are done actually through Teams itself. So that audio conferencing bridge is really not as valuable as it once used to be. You'll see the phone system here. So that's if I'm replacing my PBX with Microsoft's soft phones. I'm getting rid of my old handsets and going to Microsoft soft phones. That is the phone system license that allows me to replace a user's handset with a Microsoft version of that on the soft phone. And then it also includes a Power BI Pro license. Okay, now we also get into some of their compliance and some of their other security products with this E5, right? So I get Defender for O365 Plan 2 and Plan 1. So again, I'm not going to go into this. The stuff that is in the dotted lines that say Defender for Microsoft Plan 1, those 4 services make up Defender Plan 1, and Defender Plan 2 is Defender Plan 1 plus these other 6 services here. I can buy those as standalone, so I could just buy Defender for O365 Plan 1 or Plan 2. Now, some of the names of these have changed recently, coming out of Microsoft's Inspire conference, but we'll stick with the old ones for now because some of the naming on the security products is getting a little confusing, and we need to let some of that settle in. But so I get those. I also get some of their compliance products. So I get Teams data loss prevention. I get, some of these other products in here as well. Now, you'll notice here that the whole page makes up the Microsoft 365 E5, but there's these other 2 boxes with the compliance one split into 3. And so these are 2 other products that we can purchase, or I guess 5 other products that we can purchase. So e-discovery. So if I just wanted to do e-discovery, I could buy the e-discovery and audit SKU. If I wanted to do insider risk management, I could just buy insider risk management here, which is like privileged access and lockbox and things like that controls, again, access to confidential documents. Or I could buy the information protection and governance, which includes endpoint DLP and Teams DLP. Now, a lot of these products, not all of them, but this insider risk management, again, these are 4 services I can't buy separate. Same with the e-discovery. I cannot buy endpoint DLP separately. I have to buy it within this bundle. So if I just wanted endpoint DLP from Microsoft, I'd have to buy I'd have to buy either an E5, like an M365 E5, or the information protection and governance suite and get all those products. I can't just get that one as a standalone product. Okay, so if I want all 3 of these, that's the Microsoft 365 E5 compliance. So again, to figure out whether it makes sense to move to that or just buy 1, 2, or 3 depends on what services we need and looking at those individual prices versus purchasing the bigger bundles. Okay. Now the next thing that we have is the Enterprise Microsoft 365 E5 security product. So again, that is just all the stuff across the bottom here in this, Microsoft E5 security sort of box or rectangle. That includes everything. So I get Defender for O365, I get Azure AD Plan 2, and I get Defender for Endpoint. Okay. So as I was saying, a lot of companies, Microsoft is trying to drive everybody because a Microsoft 365 E5 is everything on this E3 and everything on this E5. Microsoft's goal is to drive everybody to E5. Their price increase on March 11th, or March, sorry, of 11% on the E3 was to decrease the delta between E5 and E3. The reason for that, um, I haven't read their quarterly report that just came out, but last year, their last fiscal year, the E5 was less than 5% of their install base. And so they're increasing E3 pricing, not giving incentives on it, trying to get more people to move to E5. They want everybody in this big bundle where you get everything from Microsoft. So in order to determine what I need to buy, really depends on what my end users are using, right? I've seen people come to me and say, I need insider risk management and I need to buy for everybody because it's in an EA and I got to buy it for all my users. Then you start having a conversation with them and it's for the top 10% of the organization, so corporate VPs or VPs and above, in order to protect people that have top secret documents and financial information and things like that they don't want, should not be leaked to the public, but not everybody needs it. The shop floor person out in a manufacturing shop doesn't have access to that type of information. And so again, you really have to not just look at what I need, you have to look at how many I need, how much that costs me versus moving everything to bundles and what Microsoft is offering and all of that sort of stuff. So it is very complicated. So if I go back to the kind of 12% of people, maybe even I would add the 7% that have hard time understanding tracking and managing and then understanding the bundles and plans. But if you think about it, this 19% in here that's looking for data, they're looking for data to figure out what should I be buying because Microsoft and all their partners are just telling them to buy E5s, and everything they do is designed to drive them here. But they know that that's an expensive proposition, and they're trying to figure out, how do I actually make this decision? Is the E5 the right thing? Now we've got clients that E5 was absolutely the right decision. We've got clients that were on E5 that we moved back to E3. We've got clients that we put on E3s with one or two pieces that are on this E5 slide. Again, all of that is an analysis that needs to be done to figure that out. But when they talk about getting the data, this is part of it. The second piece of getting data is looking to see, what am I actually using that's in use out there, right? So if I go into, this is our tool that we use that allows me to go in and take a look at my actual usage. So I'm going to just take a look at that O365 SKU for a second. So we'll just give this a second here to load. But what we're going to be able to see is, how much have I bought, how much have been assigned and subscribed to, and what am I actually using? So over on the left, these are the SKUs. This is just a small demo account. We use this on customers that are, as big as 400,000 employees. But in this demo account, you can see here, there's a Microsoft 365 E3. And I'm just going to click on that and you'll see everything has changed. So what I can see here in the middle is, this account has bought 200, has only assigned 85, and 57 have been active within the last 30 days. Now, the reason that this is important, now this is exaggerated for a couple of reasons. The 200 licenses are because their partner and they got them for free. They would never buy 200 and only need 85. But there's a lot of the times where we'll see 200 and they've only got 140 assigned, or 2,000, they have 1,600 assigned. But we want to look and see, okay, what have we bought and what do we have assigned? Microsoft considers consumption based on the percent of licenses that are allocated. So in this case, it's 42.5%. And that's because 85 of 200 have been assigned, which is 42.5%. So Microsoft assumes this account is consuming 42% of the licenses. Now, as we talked about on the last slide, we said that O365, M365 is made up of a number of services. So when I clicked on it, the services that M365 are made up of showed up over here. And so some of these are very easy to see. These are the plans within that SKU or those services. So some of them are pretty easy to understand. This Office subscription is your Microsoft 365 Enterprise Apps or Office. This is your Active Directory, right? The Azure AD plan. That's the free one, or that's the premium one. So that's the plan one. And so all of these map back to services that are in these boxes. Okay. So what we can actually see is that although 42% of the licenses are assigned or consumed in Microsoft Words, this this customer, this account is only using 22.9% of the actual services in that bundle. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in this today, but we can actually go in and start looking to see, okay, should these users be on Microsoft 365 E3 or should they be on E1s or other plans and things like that? Okay, so very similarly, when I start to look at other products as standalone, here's a Power BI license, right? So I can see again, 100 have been bought, 28 have been assigned, so Microsoft assumes 28% consumption, but only 26 have been used in the last 30 days. Now I know it says 23 over here, but if we drill through, we'll see what's going on. So if we go over in here, now this is anonymized data, but here you'll see if it's green here and green here, that means they've used the plan, they've used it in the last 30 days. If it's green here and red here, it means they've used it in the past, but they haven't used it in the last 30 days. So this person hasn't used it since June 16th. This one here has never used it, and they've been assigned a license. So again, this gives me that opportunity to go in and do some license optimization. And this is the sort of data that people are looking at trying to get into to understand what is actually going on in their environment, what they need, and how to actually use, how to actually correctly license the products. Okay, so just to summarize what we've covered so far, we've talked about how Office 365 is a subset of a bundle of products that is called Microsoft 365. Microsoft 365 includes Office 365, it includes the EMS suite, it includes Windows 10. We talked about what makes up E5. We talked about how if I have an E3 or standalone version of a product, I can step up to the E5 or I can buy a whole E5 suite. And that the way to do this and figure out what I need to drive cost out is to look at the data. Now, there's another type of license that Microsoft offers, and these are called F licenses. So the E stands for enterprise, so, whereas F stands for frontline license. Now, Microsoft considers frontline workers as people that do not have their own PC. So they don't have a dedicated PC. They use kiosks or shared PCs. Some examples would be nursing staff in a hospital, shop floor people inside of a manufacturer, retail employees within a retail shop, warehouse employees in a warehouse, uh, pilots and flight crew, maybe even ground crew for an airline. You know, so there's all kinds of people that do not have a dedicated PC. Microsoft considers them to be frontline workers. And they basically have two classifications of frontline workers. They have an F1 and they have an F3. Okay. And so an F1 worker, as you can see here, this is what Microsoft provides to an F1 worker. So again, I can buy just Office 365 F1. Okay. And you can see it's not nearly as comprehensive as all the products that are in an E3. It's a very limited subset, right? So I get Office for the web only, right? So I can log on and use Excel online, Word online. I can't use the Office client. I can't use Outlook to access email. It doesn't allow you to do that. I get SharePoint, you know, get some other stuff that nobody really uses like Yammer or Sway. But you know, users can't be administrators. They can't use the desktop app of Teams. They can't do app sharing. They can't schedule Skype meetings. They just participate in Teams meetings basically, and they don't get access to productivity servers. So what that means is they can't access Exchange Online. They can't access SharePoint Online. They can only use, sorry, on premise. Sorry, they can only use online versions of those. Okay, now the EMS product, you'll notice this is exactly the same as this. So there's no difference in the EMS product, and they don't get a Windows license. Okay, so this is basically for those people that just need, you know, very limited access to technology. I could just buy an Office 365 F1, or I can buy an M365 F1 if I want them to be managed within Azure AD, or they need access to some on-premise servers. I could just buy Office F1 and buy them Windows CALs if they need access to Windows servers. Again, you're going to do an analysis to figure out what's the most cost-effective way to do that. And then I can move to a Microsoft 365 F3 license. So again, what's the difference here? We'll talk about Windows here in a second. You can see now all of a sudden there's a bunch more services offered in here, right? So again, they just get a few more products. So you want to look at these users to figure out, is what's in F1 good for them, or do we need what's in F3, right? And again, you can kind of see that there's some restrictions, right? So they don't get access to desktop apps, right? So you'll notice, they can't use Outlook, to access email. They don't get voicemail. They don't get a OneDrive for business sync. So there's limitations in terms of what these products actually do because they're the frontline worker versions of them. And so from a technical perspective, if you're looking to make the change to move them here, you just need to make sure that that can be done and we can use that. Now, we sometimes have people that say, well, I still want my end users to be able to access Outlook, but they're really F users. Well, we would purchase an Office 365 F3 and then an Exchange Online step up from the kiosk plan, because you'll see this is Exchange Online kiosk, to get them a full Exchange license, which would allow them to use Outlook. Typically, they're using a perpetual version of Outlook on a desktop in order to do that, though there are some other ways that they do this. But again, it just gives them an opportunity to do that. And then you'll notice here that in the M365, so I can again buy O365 F3, I can do the EMS suite for them. And then if I also have a Windows 10 E3 for Microsoft 365 F3. Whew, that's a mouthful, but you'll notice a couple of things are grayed out here. The gray ones they don't get, okay? And they also don't get the long-term servicing channel, right? So there's some limitations in what we get in Windows here, okay? So again, smaller package for those people that don't have desktops. And I think this one's about $7 a month versus an E3 at $23, $24 a month. So you can see why economically, you'd definitely be wanting to look at this if you have those type of workers in your environment. Okay. And then they also have those security and compliance suites. So you'll notice these basically are what is up here, right? But they have those for the F users. Now, what you'll notice is they don't have the little 3 ones in here. It's just F5 compliance and F5 security. But these are if you want to use the security products for those F users, I could just buy the F5 security. If I just wanted to use the compliance products, I could buy the F5 compliance products, or I could buy F5 security and compliance, which is the whole bundle. So again, depending on what your security teams are looking to do, you have some flexibility in what you need, what you can do here. Again, comes down to what you're looking to do. I had one client that wanted Defender for Endpoint for all their users, Azure AD Plum 2 for all their users, and when they looked at the cost of this suite, it was pretty much, made sense to buy the suite from a pricing perspective. Now, when it didn't make sense was when we looked at the fact that they had 20,000 F3 users that they were looking to put security on that used 2,000 PCs. So they were buying Defender for 20,000 people when they only had 2,000 PCs. So it became more cost effective to buy Azure AD Plan 2 for their 20,000 users and 2,000 Defender for Endpoint on a device basis, right? So this 20,000 did not make sense. It was something like almost a 40% swing in what they were doing. So again, you really have to analyze it and figure and understand how all these part numbers come together. The challenge is, if you ever ask Microsoft, if you're in an enterprise agreement, you could go to your partner, your reseller, and say, hey, send me the Microsoft price list for my EA. I want to see all the products. There's tens of thousands of part numbers on their price list. And so again, if we go back to that data thing and understand licensing and how complex it is, this is why it's just you start thinking about all the little permutations and what makes sense. And so you have to be able to kind of dissect these things and really say, okay, what am I doing? But you can't just take Microsoft's word for it, because I'm going to go back to that customer that wanted the security product for their F3 users. Microsoft said that the only solution for them was to buy 20,000 of this, and it was really expensive because they were looking at CrowdStrike and I think Okta and looking to move to Microsoft. And just like, this price is like, it's 2x what we're paying today. How does Microsoft justify this? And they're like, well, it's 20,000 users. It's all we can do. And, but we understood that this could be bought device based. And so we introduced a solution. They went to Microsoft, and Microsoft went, we didn't even think about that, right? So you have to be really in tune with all these sort of part numbers and things like that. You also see that there's other products out there, right? And so you'll see things like, a good example is we got a lot of clients that are using additional storage for O365. When we see that, we want to get them into our tool. And the reason for that is usually we can go in and we can show the actual usage of the product and go in and take a look and see how much storage are they using. Now, a lot of times they're buying it for SharePoint sites, and we can show them SharePoint sites that are, eating up terabytes of data, or lots and lots of storage, and they're not even active sites, right? So because we can go in and take a look and see, okay, what SharePoint sites are in use, how much storage do they have, when was it active, right? So if we kind of look at this from the perspective of when was things active, these ones have never been active and they're eating up storage, right? So again, this is just a small account, but we found terabytes of storage that are in data, so we can go and they can kick off a cleanup project. We had one client that was spending $500,000 on additional storage. We went in and we were able to show them, well, you don't need all that. Look at this, you can go clean this up. And they kicked off a project. I think internally it cost them 30 grand, and they were able to reduce $400,000 of incremental storage costs. Right. So again, lots of different things to be looking at, but you can see here that there's all kinds of different products. So that you got your Power Apps, your Power Automates, you got the Dynamics products. So there's all kinds of things. There's also team rooms and things like that. And we don't have a lot of time to dive into that stuff today. But again, just different services that you can buy and get add-ons for, so depending on what you're looking to do, you really want to be looking at what's going on out there. One of the things we're seeing a lot of people start to look at is this multi-geo, and that's where you get to split your tenancy over multi-geographies. So in other words, I might need to be worried about compliance rules in, say, the European Union, and we're a US-based company. And so maybe instead of just having a tenant for all our users in the US, we want to have a tenant for US users and a tenant for European users. And the multi-geo allows you to do that. Only place you can buy that is in the EA. It's not available via the CSP program. Minimum of 250 users in multi-geo, and 10% of those 250 actually have to be using it. So there are some restrictions on that. But again, just a number of different products and services that you can get from Microsoft. Okay. So, if I'm going to summarize this with some stats that are out there other than what we had, CIO Dive basically says that 44% of O365 licenses are underutilized or oversized. I would actually argue that actually is closer to 60 to 70%. As we showed you in here, because we see it, high 20s is typically what people are using of the products and services that are available to them. We've seen it as high as 40-ish, but a lot of these licenses, because of the way Microsoft does bundles, are definitely not being utilized, right? You see here, this is 23.7% use. So that's 67% underutilized. The biggest reason that people overbuy is they batch purchase bundles without understanding what they need or how the data works. I see so often clients that buy 200-300 more subscriptions than they need to keep there, so that as they onboard people, they can just apply those licenses to them, so that they don't have to go and get purchase orders and things like that. And you think about that, 200-300 licenses times $30 a month times 12 months, you're talking $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year of licenses that may or may not be used. And then a lot of the times when we go in and analyze them, they're actually wasting 200, 300, 400 licenses that could be cleaned up, and they don't actually even need to hold those, right? Again, Microsoft trying to sell and provide discounts on E5 bundles over E3s, and then utilizing less than that 40% of what they're actually what they're using. And then the complexity of managing licenses is holding companies hostage. So often we see people like, okay, but I don't want to have 10 different user profiles and have to manage that, so I'm just going to buy E3 for everybody. Yeah, I agree, managing 10 might be complicated. Managing 3 or 4, not necessarily. And so you really, don't want to allow this licensing complexity to hold you hostage. There's ways to automate things. The problem is most times companies don't have the staff or the resources in order to actually automate that stuff more so than it being complex, right? So, you know, we're on a mission. We want to save companies 10 billion by assisting them with our tools and processes, to basically carry out cost reduction actions, and that's really what we're trying to do. And so one of the things that we're offering right now is, you know, most companies, when we go in and analyze their O365, I've shown you just real briefly how some of the data that we get. We're finding on average 27% savings without doing anything, just cleaning up licenses. And the lowest we've seen is 7%. The highest we've seen is well over 40. So you think about it, one company we saw was buying 40% more licenses than they needed. So think about putting 40% of uh, that spend back into your IT budget and what you could do with that. No matter how big you are, that's pretty significant. I mean, we use these tools internally on ourselves for a couple of dozen users, and we're all and our Azure spend, because we monitor that as well. um, we're always finding savings that we can use to buy other tools to spend on projects to get new things developed or internal things. And so we're offering a savings, what we call a proof of savings blueprint right now. So it's an opportunity for you to connect to our tool. We connect in for 30 days. There's some things that we do for you over the course of those 4 weeks. And at the end of the proof of savings blueprint, you will get a report that basically says, here's exactly how much waste or opportunity there is to reduce licensing costs inside of your environment. Here's the kind of level of that, so a low level, medium, and a high. And if you're interested in moving forward with a subscription to our SaaS or our services around that, an annual subscription around that, we can help you obtain those. So it's a low cost way to find out if you're actually able to save money on Office 365. And right now, actually, what we have on there is we charge a little bit for it. Like I said, it's depending on your size, anywhere from a couple $1,000 up to a few $1,000 in order for us to go in and do this proof of savings for 30 days, mostly to cover our costs. But if we don't find savings, we give a 100% money back guarantee. If you're not happy with what happens at the end, we won't charge you. Thank you for joining us today. If you've got any questions, my contact information is there, or feel free to book a call to have a discussion with Herb. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.